back, everyone. The last couple of solo episodes, or Learning with Human Kinetics, have been about cortisol and also the importance of effective coaching. But we are going to switch it up just a little bit today and get back to talking about training. Today I'm going to talk about how your training goals may be affected based on the way you are training. Now, more specifically, I'll be talking about interference. Now, what is interference? Now, when we think about it in simple terms, by definition, it is some kind of obstruction. Think about, when I was thinking about this talk, I was thinking a little about American football. Now, even if you aren't a fan of American football, you've probably watched the game casually, and you know the goal of the offense is to get the ball down the field, to cross the goal line, and to score a touchdown. Now, the issue is there's a team on the other side playing defense and attempting to run interference on your plans. If you're a fan of a team, playing against someone like, I don't know, say Patrick Mahomes, or going back a little further, Tom Brady or Peyton Manning, you might say illegal defensive pass interference gets called more often than not. It's a joke, guys. Don't send hate mail or anything. I respect all three of them, even if one of them might have curbed the rules every now and then. How does this relate to training, though? Now, let's say the offensive player is your target goal. Now, that could be hypertrophy, strength, or power. You're getting into your workout, and along comes the dreaded conditioning portion of your workout. Now, I say dreaded because very few athletes that I know or train personally like conditioning. In this analogy, the defensive player is conditioning, or more specifically, long-form conditioning that turns into a test of endurance. Now, we know as athletes, some type of conditioning is needed in order to become the complete, well-rounded, high-performing athlete that you want to be. The problem is that conditioning turns into long endurance sessions sometimes, and perhaps more detrimental to your goals, it occurs a little too close to your strength training session. Now, remember the football analogy, the offensive player or the strength session in this case is doing everything right to get the results you're looking for, but the defensive player in this case, the aerobic endurance training, gets way too close and interferes with the play, preventing the ultimate goal of getting maximally stronger, getting more powerful, or growing your muscles. You can look at the analogy a couple of ways. If it's pure interference, you credit the defensive player for doing the job. In this case, the interference is preventing the ultimate goal of gaining strength or power. If the interference is illegal, the offense or the strength or power gains ultimately benefits, which could be an entirely different conversation when it comes to training. But before we get too much further, we have to acknowledge that, again, some level of muscular endurance is needed. Like I said before, most athletes need a little bit of everything to be the complete athlete, but most tend to lean on the strength or power side as opposed to endurance. Now, those endurance athletes might be, like distance runners, rowers, long distance swimmers, athletes like that. But still, everyone needs some type of, some level of endurance. Now, why do they need some level of endurance? A muscle with a high capacity for endurance can sustain repeated contractions over a longer period of time. Now, this doesn't mean you have to go run for hours, and actually that's one of the things we're trying to be cautious of in order to avoid interference. You can still work muscular endurance with high rep resistance training. Other modes might be like a rower or a ski erg or a bike. Cycling might be a good option. It is possible to train your muscles for aerobic endurance in ways other than running, but again, timing is important. Now, the idea of interference or interference theory isn't new. It actually dates back to over 40 years ago. In 1980, a guy by the name of Dr. Robert Hickson, which some of you may be familiar with, decided to look into it. And he conducted a study where he took a group of previously untrained males and had them do a 10-week training program with both strength and endurance workouts. What he found, as we now know, is that the participants' strength gains were impaired doing the concurrent strength and endurance training program, and he called it the interference effect. Since then, there have been other studies that have confirmed what Dr. Hickson found, stating that when strength and endurance-based training are done concurrently, hypertrophy and strength are compromised. On the other hand, when strength and endurance training are done concurrently, there is a potential for endurance athletes to see an increase in their performance. Now, I have mentioned concurrent training a few times now, so I should define that before we go too much further. Concurrent training refers to the simultaneous application of strength or power along with endurance conditioning sessions. When they are combined, that is when we get the interference effect. In 2012, a meta-analysis was conducted examining interference. The results were interesting and suggest a few things to note. One was that the classic interference effect could be because of a higher probability of overreaching because of the increase in total training volume when combining strength training and endurance training. A common benefit, though, of concurrent training is the loss of body fat. But important to note, body fat was reduced most with high-intensity endurance exercise as opposed to long, slow distance. And for strength and power athletes, high intensity is always going to be recommended. This is for a number of reasons, primarily in the case of specificity. Also to note, the largest decrements were found in power as compared to strength or hypertrophy. This is because when including endurance training, force at high velocities is affected much more than force at low velocities. Now, what does this all mean? It's important for most athletes to train concurrently, like I mentioned at the beginning, in order to be fully prepared for the demands of the sport. Preferably not in the same day, but it is bound to happen within the same week during certain phases. This also means training to the specificity of the sport. A tennis player, or maybe a better example might be a football player that needs to train for speed and power, shouldn't use long distance running as a form of endurance training. Instead, it would be better for a speed or power athlete to use high intensity endurance exercise or activity to build endurance. And depending on their training schedule, they might do it 3 or so days per week, but each session is going to be quick. These types of athletes shouldn't be doing long duration endurance exercises that last 20 minutes or longer. Like I said, it should be very high intensity, which will lessen the detrimental effects of hypertrophy, strength, and power. Think of a sprinter in track. They're very powerful and fast athletes, and they need to build capacity, but they aren't going out running with the distance runners to build that capacity. I always like to see the videos of the track athletes being asked what the longest distance is that they've ever run, and most of the sprinters say they don't run more than 200 meters. Some might run 400, but you never hear them say they train with the distance runners. That's probably for a couple of reasons. One is that they have no desire to run long distance, and that's why they're sprinters. And they also know that they want to maintain the strength, power, and speed that they have spent so much time building up. Another question you might be asking is how these workouts should be split up. In order to avoid interference, it is recommended to be strategic about the planning and planning out your sessions so that strength training and endurance training are split up on different days. It's also recommended, though, to rest for at least 48 hours after high intensity exercise. So if your schedule absolutely demands that you get in strength training and cardiovascular endurance training on the same day, split it up as much as possible. Unless you're a pro athlete, it might be tough to get in 2 sessions in a day regardless. But an example might be to get in 1 session early in the morning and then rest for at least 6 hours before going into your second session. Now, of course, that's also assuming that you're getting an adequate amount of calories and nutrients to recover between those 2 sessions. Based on the previous recommendations, though, you'll be limiting your high-intensity cardio sessions to 3 or 4 days per week. This isn't a new topic, but it's an important one. And if you're a trainer or coach or an athlete that wants to get the most out of your training, I do recommend you take this as important information and maybe an overview, but I encourage you to dive deeper into learning more on your own. A couple recommendations I can point you to are Timing Resistance Training by Amy Ashmore, and high performance training for sports, which I frequently reference. I think that's an excellent book for any coach or athlete. I understand not everyone loves research, but you can learn so much and get a better understanding for the science behind training if you look into some of that research. One of the studies that I referenced today is titled Concurrent Exercise Training, Do Opposites Distract? That one is by Coffey and Hawley, which was published in 2017. The meta-analysis I referenced was by Wilson and colleagues titled Concurrent Training, a Meta-Analysis Examining Interference of Aerobic and Resistance Exercise. There are countless other studies that you can look into, and you can find a lot of them in our Human Kinetics journals. As always, I encourage you to stay up to date on all the latest information and resources by following our social media channels on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, X, and YouTube. If you have topics you would like to hear more about, please let us know. Drop a message in the comments and let us know your thoughts, or send us a message. I really do want to cover some topics that I know you're going to be interested in learning more about, and areas that I can maybe direct you to help you learn more about. So again, I know this one was brief today, but a very important topic that I encourage all of you to look more into. So thanks for spending a few minutes of your time with me today, and until next time, be well.